Kyle was a gifted swordsman who rose to become the hero and defeated the Demon King. Yet he did not feel satisfied, for by that time he had already lost everything that he held dear. By fortune, a magic crystal belonging to the fallen Demon King carried him 4 years into the past. With that second chance, Kyle resolved to rewrite the world's fate and save every person he loved from the demon army. Upon the continent of Lunders, 2 opposing powers existed. On the right side dwelled the races favored by the god of light, which included humans, dwarves, and elves. On the left side lived the demons, who were granted blessings by the god of darkness. For thousands of years these forces waged war without rest. Yet 3 centuries ago, a rather peace-loving demon king had ascended to the throne and halted all aggression against the humanoids. The humans and their allies grew accustomed to this uneasy truce and were unprepared for what was to come. In the 5th month of the year 2826, a new demon king claimed the throne. Under his command, the demon army unleashed a ruthless assault upon the humanoids, an event that would later be remembered as the Great Invasion. Kingdoms of men and allies were swept aside in days, and even the mightiest empire could not shield itself. As despair deepened, the humanoids enacted a desperate gamble by deceiving their surviving soldiers and throwing everything into an all-out war. While the armies clashed against the demon forces and their generals, a hand-picked group of the strongest warriors was sent to infiltrate the Demon King's fortress and assassinate him. Kyle led that team, alongside his dearest friend Theron and the elf mage Urza. As they sprinted down a corridor, a sudden explosion ripped through the walls, scattering them apart and instantly killing the soldiers who followed. Theron was injured in the blast, and as he spotted 2 demons guarding a chained female demon, he understood the truth. He would need to hold them off to protect the mission. He told Kyle and Urza to proceed without him, promising he would rejoin them when the battle was done. But Kyle knew full well that his companion was choosing to sacrifice his life to stall the 2 guards. While Theron clashed alone, Kyle and Urza pressed onward until they reached the throne chamber. Kyle swallowed a vial of concentrated roid juice, a stimulant that allowed him to fight at peak strength. Urza, however, looked downhearted, for she understood that the medicine's aftereffects would eventually claim his life. Kyle then pushed open the doors to the throne room and discovered a glowing gemstone at its center. Curious, he stepped forward to investigate. At that instant, Urza cried out a warning of an attack descending from above. Kyle managed to deflect some of the dark orbs with his sword, yet several slipped past and forced him to his knees. Soon, a massive orb far more dreadful hurtled toward him while he remained unable to move. Urza rushed forward, raising a magical barrier to protect them both. The defense shattered, and the orb began to consume her. With a final smile toward Kyle, she allowed herself to be erased from existence. It was then that the Demon King descended from the ceiling. Consumed with fury, Kyle stood and converted his rage into strength, cutting through the spheres hurled at him. Yet the Demon King's body was shrouded by a dense shell of mana, rendering Kyle's efforts useless. Relentless strikes forced Kyle to retreat, and he hid behind a pillar. The Demon King unleashed a void orb, which devoured the stone support entirely, leaving Kyle exposed once more. Ravaged by further attacks, he staggered and suffered grievous wounds. In desperation, Kyle called upon the AI voice sealed within his sword's gemstone, asking about the devastating spell from earlier. The enchanted assistant, like an upgraded Alexa, explained that the technique was an unblockable high-tier sorcery that annihilated anything it touched. Kyle realized that victory was impossible unless he resolved to abandon his own life. He commanded Alexa to release the gemstone's full power. Obediently, the spirit awakened the relic, and its brilliance enveloped Kyle in a radiant aura that repelled all assaults from the Demon King. Bursting forward at full speed, he shattered the enemy's weapon and drove his blade deep into the Demon King's chest. Yet in that moment the Demon Lord struck back, landing a mortal blow upon Kyle as well. Undeterred, Kyle pressed ahead until both his sword and the gemstone crumbled into fragments. That final thrust, however, was enough to bring the Demon King down, his body bursting into countless black feathers. As Kyle's strength faded, he thought to himself that the battle had finally ended, and now he could surrender to death in peace. He keeps thinking about how everything he once wanted to protect has already slipped away, including his family, his comrades, and even the girl he deeply loved. He falls to the ground, only for a dark feather to drop beside him and vanish like smoke in the wind. The very next instant, the magic gemstone begins to glow ominously. Kyle drags himself back up and realizes that if the crystal loses control, the consequences could be catastrophic. Stumbling forward with each heavy step, he forces himself closer until his hands grab the glowing crystal. Immediately, a massive magic circle appears beneath his feet and envelopes him. When Kyle next opens his eyes, he is shocked to see that he is back in his own room, with his town still standing and unharmed. Tears spill down his face as he assumes this is nothing but a sweet dream before his final rest in the afterlife. At that moment, his childhood friend Lise bursts into his room to wake him up. She freezes in concern when she notices his tear-filled eyes, but Kyle cannot control his emotions upon seeing her alive once again. He hugs her so tightly that Lise, the tough tomboy, blushes red like a tomato at a festival. Since Kyle still doubts if this is real, his hands wander a little too far south, and while fumbling with his balance, he trips and falls on top of her as she lies on the bed. That awkward scene overloads Lisa's patience, so she hurls him across the room and delivers a rib-cracking punch that leaves him rolling on the floor gasping like a fish out of water. She yells at him to at least take her out for dinner before skipping straight to second base, and then bolts out of the room in embarrassment. Kyle finally notices that the pain from her punch feels real, which proves this is no dream. Suddenly, his eyes land on the same red crystal from the Demon King's castle, still in his possession, and confusion floods his mind. He realizes that he looks much younger and shows no scars or injuries, making him wonder what exactly is going on. He begins suspecting the unthinkable, that he has somehow returned to the past. But he quickly shakes the thought away, joking to himself that if time travel were possible, surely someone would have shown up at Stephen Hawking's party already. Before he can think further, his stomach growls like a beast, distracting him from his theories. On the table, he finds a lavish meal waiting for him, clearly cooked by Lise, since neither he nor his mother can boil water properly. He gratefully digs in, savoring homemade food for the first time in years, and overeats until every last bite vanishes. Just then, his best friend Theron walks in and stares at the empty table in horror. He asks Kyle if he is secretly training to beat Luffy in an eating competition, because it looks like the poor food had no chance of survival. He grunts in disappointment, admitting he had also been eyeing the delicious meal. But before he can sulk any longer, Kyle abruptly asks him about the date. When Theron casually says it is the 5th month of the year 2823, Kyle freezes. That means he has truly returned to the past. Theron grins and reminds him that today also happens to be his birthday, and he will forgive him for eating all the food if Kyle considers it his birthday present. Theron cheerfully decides to beg Lise to whip up another dish for him, while Kyle silently decides he needs real answers. He heads into the storeroom beside his house, then descends into the basement that his mother has transformed into a vast personal library. The moment Kyle lays eyes on her, memories of finding her dead body in the previous timeline stab at his heart, but he steadies himself when she speaks. He tells her that he has a question about magic. Since she is one of the few archmages in the entire kingdom, practically no one alive knows more about magic than her. His mother beams with joy upon hearing his request, and Kyle wastes no time asking if there are any spells that can turn back time. She explains that while there are spells capable of manipulating time, they are essentially impossible to cast because of the astronomical mana requirements. Even the greatest mage in history could not rewind time by a single second. Kyle presses further, asking if it might be possible through a magic tool designed to store mana. His mother nods that it is an interesting concept, but gathering that much energy would take at least 1,000 years. Kyle takes the thought further, asking what would happen if someone used a forbidden right to convert human life force into magical energy. She pauses, thinking deeply, and admits it would still be highly inefficient. To produce that amount of power, at least half the population of the continent would need to be sacrificed. Worse, there is currently no known magical tool that could contain such overwhelming mana. However, she finally adds that there is one exception. Pulling out an ancient book, she tells him about the Heart of the Divine Dragon, a legendary artifact once wielded by the ancient magic kingdom of Zarls. The dragon's heart allowed their civilization to flourish in ways the world had never seen. But eventually, its power burned out, and when the kingdom could no longer sustain itself without it, Zarls was reduced to ruin. His mother explains that the dragon's heart holds enough power to store limitless magic, even enough to travel back through time itself. But she also tells him that the artifact vanished about 1,000 years ago when the ancient kingdom collapsed into dust. She suspects that demons may have discovered it since then, though Kyle silently knows her guess is painfully accurate. He cannot reveal the truth to her yet. Later, Kyle heads up to his favorite spot overlooking the town. As he gazes down at the peaceful scenery, he cannot help but wonder why the Demon King had been hoarding so much mana just to rewind time. His thoughts spiral, but they are interrupted when Lise suddenly shows up. She is still fuming from the morning's embarrassing incident. Kyle immediately drops to his knees in dramatic fashion and apologizes, explaining that his actions earlier were because he had a deeply troubling dream that shook him to the core. Lise instantly realizes that the dream must have shown her dying, and the thought softens her heart. She chooses to forgive Kyle this time, although her cheeks are still puffed up with leftover irritation. After that, she wishes him a happy birthday, and the words strike Kyle like a blade of memory. He recalls the invasion of the demon army that began with his hometown, because their village stood at the border region. The demons set everything ablaze, turning their town to ashes and slaughtering all who lived there. That was the day he lost Lise forever. In the past timeline, he swore vengeance against the demons for taking her away, but now, standing at the edge of this new beginning, he makes a different vow. This time, he will protect Lise, his family, and everyone else he loves. With fierce determination burning in his chest, Kyle declares that he will rewrite his destiny and reshape the fate of the world, no matter the cost. The story will be continued in future videos. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.